This video is for the unboxing and assembly of the Harvey Alpha HW110S-36PG table saw, featuring the Big Eye fence system and the MG-36PRO Miter Gauge, which also applies to the 52PG models. When unboxing the HW110S table saw, do note that there are 4 packages included: the Big Eye B36 fence assembly, the Big Eye B36 guide rail assembly, the overhead dust collection assembly, and the HW110S-36PG cabinet assembly. We will start by unboxing the table saw cabinet assembly first by cutting the straps, removing the cardboard panels, and removing the plastic wrap that is protecting the cabinet assembly. When unboxing the table saw assembly, you will need to remove and set aside the following items: the extension table, the Compass MG-36PRO Miter Gauge, the motor cover, the left extension wing, and the right extension wing. Once we've removed everything surrounding the table saw cabinet, we will lift the plastic cover and remove the paper protecting the cast iron tabletop. The machine is secured to the pallet using M8 hex bolts. After removing these bolts from underneath the pallet, position the machine in the desired location. When removing the contents inside the cabinet, you should receive the dado table insert, the general purpose destroyer blade, the handwheel handle, a push stick, and a set of hex and open-end wrenches. Using the handwheel handle, we will now install it onto the tilting handwheel. After installing the handle into the tilting handwheel, we will set the blade angle to 0 degrees. To install the table saw blade, we will start by loosening the locking knob on the elevation handwheel and raise the arbor fully. Using the included opened and closed end wrenches, we will use it to loosen and remove the arbor nut. Remove the arbor nut and arbor washer and set them aside. Next, we will remove the table saw blade from its packaging. Notice that there are 2 extra holes on this blade. These 2 holes are for European style blades. They act as locating pins to prevent the blade from spinning freely in case the arbor nut was not secured. If your table saw blade does not have the locating pinholes, then you can remove them from the arbor washer as seen here. If your table saw blade does have locating pinholes, then do not remove these pins. We have removed the pins for demonstration purposes and will reinstall them before installing the blade. Install the blade onto the arbor with the teeth facing forward, and then align the arbor washer pins with the locating pinholes in the blade and the arbor before tightening the arbor nut. When installing the blade, ensure the tapered side of the arbor washer faces outward, while the nut indentation faces inward and mates with the washer. Use the included 24mm and 27mm wrenches to fully tighten the arbor nut. Use the 24mm wrench to lock the arbor in place and the 27mm wrench to fasten the arbor nut. Next, we will be installing the table insert. To install the table saw insert, first hook the head of the rear insert screw under the notch of the limit plate. Then adjust the leveling set screw. Finally, secure the front screw to lock the insert in place. Now we will talk about how to level the table insert. Start by removing the pan head screw at the front of the insert. Next, loosen the special screw until it's close to being flush with the insert. Do not remove it, as we are only trying to back out this special screw. Now, we will loosen all 4 M5 leveling set screw to allow the insert plate to be lowered. With a straight edge placed over the insert plate, tighten the set screws until the insert is flush with the cast iron table. Make sure to check the levelness of the front and rear and adjust the leveling set screws as needed. One way to verify that the insert was installed correctly is to lay the straight edge flat on the table and check along the edges as seen here. Once we've leveled the side of the insert, we'll now adjust the special set screw at the front to make sure that it is flush with the cast iron main table. At this point, we are nearly done, and we will check to see if there is any wobble or shift in the insert plate. If you notice some movement in the rear half of the insert, then adjust the M5 screw on the underside of the insert to add more tension. Once adjusted, install the pan head screw into the special screw at the front of the insert and tighten fully. Once we're done, we'll do one final check with a straight edge to make sure everything is flat. Here, we will be aligning the table T-slot parallel with the blade. It is recommended to have a T-slot dial indicator to measure the distance between the edge of the blade to the table T-slot. Mark the point on the blade where the first measurement is taken from. Zero out the indicator, then rotate the blade 180 degrees. Remeasure the distance using the exact same point on the blade. The difference between both measurements must be less than 0.2 mm. If adjustments are needed, use the hex wrench to loosen the 4 M10 bolts securing the tabletop to the cabinet. With the bolts loosened, use a dead blow hammer to gently tap the sides of the cast iron tabletop as needed until the T-slots are parallel with the blade. After making adjustments to the table, use the T-slot indicator to check for parallelism of the blade and the T-slot. Once everything is aligned, tighten the 4 M10 bolts securing the table to the cabinet again. To access the motor pulley belt tensioner, remove the 6 panhead screws and take off the side cover as seen here. From the cabinet door side, there is a tensioning slot on the motor mounting bracket with a M10 hex bolt used for maintaining tension on the motor belt. Use a socket wrench to loosen the M10 tensioner bolt so that adjustments can be made to the belt tension. Apply downward pressure to the motor to increase the belt tension and then tighten the M10 tensioner hex bolt. Check that the belt has sufficient tension and apply more if the belt appears loose or slips at startup, or when making cuts with the blade in a low position. Once the belt is tensioned, reinstall the side cover and fasten the screws. Install the motor cover by aligning the hinge pin on the cabinet with the hinge on the cover. Now we will be installing the extension wings. A helpful tip is to use clamps to support and hold the extension wings up while making adjustments, which improves the ease of installation. Now we'll remove the screws from the side of the main table. We'll start by installing the left extension wing. Do note the cast iron main table and extension wings have bevel at the front side only. We'll attach the wing to the main table using the M8 cap screws removed previously, but we will not fully tighten the screws to allow adjustments for leveling the table. Using a straight edge, place it across the front of the main table and the left wing. Align the left extension wing with the cast iron main table, then tighten the front mounting screws. Confirm that the wing and the main table are flush at the seam on top and along the front rail mounting surface. Repeat the same process for the back as well. After adjusting the left extension wing and the main table for coplanarity, tighten the mounting screws fully. Now we will move on to installing the right extension wing. Similar to the left extension wing, we will use the M8 cap screws to secure the table but not fully tighten to allow for adjustments. We will then align the right extension wing flush with the cast iron main table, then fully tighten the mounting screws. If you are having trouble leveling the main table with the extension wings, add some shims between the two tables to help level the extension wing. Now we will go over the unboxing and assembly of the Big Eye Rip Fence system. First, we will start by unboxing the Big Eye Fence system. When unboxing the Big Eye, do note that there are 2 packages total for the full assembly, one package being the fence and the other package being the rails. In the rail packaging, you should receive the following items: the rear guide rail assembly, the rear extension table fix blocks used for mounting the RT10A rear tables, connecting rod assembly used for supporting the front and rear rails. a set of scales both included in metric and imperial. Do note that the imperial scales are installed on the rail. And lastly, the front guide rail assembly. To summarize, you should have the following items: the front guide rail assembly, the rear guide rail assembly, the rear extension table fixed blocks, the set of scales, and lastly, the connecting rod assembly. Next, we will unbox the second package, which includes the fence assembly. When unboxing the fence assembly, do note that there are hardwares and tools included inside the box. To start the assembly process, we will start by installing the front guide rails. We will need the mounting hardware along with the wrench and a small ruler or scale for aligning the rail. Note that the mounting hardware has 3 possible positions, which are the following. If you are installing the Big Eye fence system on an Alpha table saw, do note that you will be using the highest setting as seen here for installing the rail. To determine the correct position of the mounting hardware, you will need to measure the distance from the top edge of the table to the center of the drilled hole. In this specific scenario, we found that the hole is 29 millimeters from the top, so we will set the mounting hardware in the highest position as seen here. Before mounting the rails, make sure that the main table and extension tables are flush with each other at the front. This will make the installation process much easier. After determining the correct position for the screws, we will slide the screws into the front rail as seen here. We will use the 55mm eccentric screws for the extension table and the 40mm for the main table. We will install and position them to match the holes and slide them right in place. We will need to align the front rail to be flush with the left wing. Using a small scale or ruler, slide the rail over to the left so that it matches up as seen here. Once the front rail is in place, we will now install the flat washer, spring washer, and hex nut to secure the front rail into place. Tighten the hex nuts so that it secures the rail. Next, we will be installing the extension table. Do note that the extension table mounting holes must be leveled with the holes on the main table. For other models besides the Alpha series, some modifications may be needed. For the Alpha series table saw, hand tighten the extension table mounting bolts to loosely hold the table in place before making any adjustments to the table. We will need to use a straight edge to level the extension table before tightening up these mounting screws. Now we will start the process of mounting the rear rail. For any table saws that does not come with pre-drilled holes, you will need to drill and tap 3 threaded holes in the rear for mounting the block. This process only applies for table saws that does not have pre-drilled holes. To determine the distance from the top, use the provided template to mark out the distance from the top of the table to the position where the hole should be drilled. Please refer to the manual for more details on drilling the holes. For table saws with pre-drilled holes, we will use the eccentric screws and slide them into the rail that matches the same position as we did with the front rail. We will align it and install the rail as seen here. Before securing the rail, make sure that the rail aligns with the edge of the main table before securing it in place. If you haven't done so, the next thing to do is install the support legs for the extension table. Next, we will level the table saw by extending the support feet so that they contact the floor firmly. Make sure to check the extension table is leveled and make any adjustments to the leveling feet if needed. Now we will install the connecting rod assembly. If your table saw has a router table installed on the right side, then you may choose to omit this component since this is used to support the front and rear rails. To install the support rod, loosen the nut and adjust the spacing on the left and right lead screw to ensure that the length of the rod is slightly less than the width of the table. Next, we will install the eccentric screw on both ends of the connecting rod. With the eccentric screw still loosened, install the ends of the connecting rod assembly into the T-slot of the front and rear guide rails. Slide the connecting rod up to the extension table and using a wrench to tighten and secure the eccentric screws. Once the eccentric screws are secured, rotate the connecting rod so that the spacing of the guide rails match with the width of the table and fasten the nuts on either end. The purpose of the connecting rod is to reinforce the rails to prevent flexing caused by the fence when it is clamping under pressure. The connecting rod also helps allow you to adjust the front and rear rail to be parallel with each other. Once we've installed the connecting rod, we will now assemble the fence assembly. To ensure the fence fits properly onto your table saw, check the pointer on the rear locking support and set the width to match the front to rear distance of your cast iron main table. If the width of the table is between 685 to 690 mm, first install the rod sleeve. If the distance of the table from front to back measures between 690 mm to 795 mm, you will need to modify the rod sleeve by shortening it to equal the distance of 800 mm minus the width of your table. To adjust the position of the rear locking support, flip the fence assembly upside down and loosen the screws on the support and the rear bracket locking block as seen here. Once the screws are loosened, slide the rear locking support until the pointer aligns with the scale indicating the correct width of the table. Then secure the screws that were previously loosened. For installing the rod sleeve, you will need to loosen the M6 set screw and remove the rear locking knob as seen here. Remember that if the width of the table is between 690 and 795 millimeters, you will need to modify the length of the rod sleeve as needed before installing. Slip the rod sleeve into the locking rod and then screw the rear locking knob back on. Do not tighten the set screw at this point because we will need to make adjustments later on. Before installing the fence onto the rails, depress the safety stop on the front of the guide rail. When installing the fence, remember to release the locking handle before installing it into the front and rear guide rails. Align the bearings with the steel rods on the front rails. For the rear guide rails, slide the rear locking support onto the rail as shown. After installing the fence, remember to release the safety stop to prevent the fence from accidentally sliding off the guide rails. Out of the box, the slider and guide rails are factory calibrated. However, if you notice any wobble or movement in the assembly during use, follow these steps to adjust the bearings. First, you will want to loosen the fence locking knob and remove the fence extrusion. Using a small flathead screwdriver, remove the magnetic sealing covers. Next, loosen the 3 set screws on the eccentric nuts, as seen here. Once the set screws are loosened, rotate the eccentric nut with a 8mm hex wrench until the fine adjustment knob contacts the guide rail. After adjusting all 4 eccentric nuts, tighten the set screws back up and reinstall the sealing covers. If the fence locking handle is not applying enough locking force, you will need to fine-tune the front and rear clamping mechanism. To adjust the locking force of the front locking handle, you'll need to loosen the screw completely. Then tighten the screw until you notice some resistance. From there, rotate the screw by 1/6 of a turn counterclockwise. To adjust the rear locking force, start by raising the lock handle. Then, loosen the M6 set screw on the rear locking knob. Turn the knob counterclockwise to disengage the clamping mechanism. Now, rotate the knob clockwise until you feel some resistance. Then, rotate it counterclockwise by approximately 1/8 of a rotation and re-secure the M6 set screw. When tightening the set screw, be careful not to rotate the rear locking knob as well. Use a non-marring plier to hold the knob steady if needed. Once you have made the adjustments, lower the fence locking handle and check to see that the fence is secured on both ends. To adjust the fine adjustment knob, use a 4mm hex wrench to gently turn the eccentric shaft left or right until the knob can be operated smoothly, as seen here. The fence height position can be adjusted using the 3 eccentric position blocks on each side of the fence body. To adjust this, loosen the M4 eccentric screw using a 2.5mm hex wrench, then manually adjust them to a higher or lower position as needed before tightening the screw. After adjusting the eccentric screw, reinstall the fence and secure it with the red locking knob. Remember to verify that there is enough clearance underneath the fence preventing any contact with the table surface. Now we will check the fence to make sure it is perpendicular to the table using a calibrated 90-degree reference, such as a combination square seen here. If the fence is out of square, we will need to first verify that the table surface and the guide rails are both leveled with each other, ensuring that they are paralleled. If the fence is slightly out of square, we will need to fix this by installing some copper shims. Start by loosening the fence locking knob and slide the fence forward to access the M6 screws securing the fence body. Next, lift the locking handle and use a hex wrench to remove the M6 screw seen here. Then, loosen the 2 M6 set screw located here. After removing the screw, if the fence body does not detach from the slider at first, disengage the front locking block by loosening the screw using an M6 hex wrench. Then, use a flathead screwdriver to gently pry the locking block back to release it. Once the fence body detaches from the slider, lift and place copper shims on either the left or right side as needed. Check the fence and table for perpendicularity and use shims accordingly. Once the fence is squared to the table, reinstall the M6 screw at the top and the M6 set screw on the front to secure the fence body back into the slider. You will need to readjust the front locking force by raising the locking handle and adjust the locking block until you feel noticeable resistance, and then back the screw about 1/6 of a rotation counterclockwise. Then check the locking handle again to ensure that it properly engages and disengages. Next, we will be tuning the fence to be parallel with the T-slot. For this process, we recommend to have a T-slot dial indicator to calibrate the parallelism of the fence to the T-slot and the blade. When setting the fence up, we will need to engage the locking handle and position the flip stop firmly against both sides of the fence slider. This will prevent the fence from sliding as we release the fence locking handle. With the dial indicator zeroed out, slide it in the track from one end to the other to get the initial reading and verify that the fence is parallel to the miter slot, which should be parallel to the blade. Next, we will slightly loosen the 6 screws that secure the fence body to the slider. To fine-tune the fence, we will adjust the 2 set screws located at the front of the slider. This will push the fence to the left or right depending on the set screw that we adjust. Rotating and advancing the left screw pushes the fence clockwise or towards the right, while adjusting the right screw will push the fence counterclockwise or towards the left. It is important to remember to leave a few thousandths of tolerance at the rear end of the fence. If the gap at the back of the fence is narrower than the front, this could cause the workpiece to get pinched during cutting and lead to kickback. If done correctly, we should see a few thousandths wider at the back of the fence and 0 at the front, as seen here. Now we will set the high and low stops for the fence. To do this, we need to raise the blade to its highest position. With the fence in the high position, release the locking handle and slide it over to the blade to where it barely touches the blade. Next, slide the scale so the 0 lines up with the red mark on the fence. Once the 0 position is determined and set, slide the fence out of the way and use a hex wrench to loosen the stop block and slide it over to where it meets the scale and secure it back into place. This will set the high position. To set the low position of the fence, we will need to loosen the knobs on the fence and bring the fence to the low position, as seen here. Once the fence is set in the low position, secure the locking knobs and then slide the fence to where it touches the blade. Slide the scale so that the 0 lines up with the red mark on the fence. Using a hex wrench, loosen the stop block and slide it over to touch the scale, setting the low position. The Big Eye fence system has 4 flip stops that can be set at any position on the front rail. To set this, you will need to use a hex wrench to loosen the flip stop and slide it over to where it touches the fence. From there, secure the screw back into place. This will set the position of your flip stop. After installing the fence, we will now install the switch. Do note the switch mounting hardware is found inside the fence packaging. Loosely fasten the switch mounting hardwares onto the switch, but do not tighten the square nuts up completely as we will need to slide them into the rail. We'll need to align the square nut with the T-track on the underside of the front rail and slide the switch onto the rail. Use a hex wrench to fully tighten the switch mounting screws on both sides and complete the switch installation. Next, we'll go over aligning the riving knife with the blade. We'll start by installing the riving knife and lock it into place. Then remove the insert plate. Place the straight edge against the blade and the riving knife and check if the riving knife is aligned with the blade, as seen here. In our example, there is a gap at the front of the blade, so we will need to adjust the riving knife position to bring it into alignment. To adjust the riving knife, you'll need to use the included 3mm and 5mm hex wrenches. On the riving knife bracket, there are 3 screws where the upper and lower screws lock or unlock the alignment settings for the 4 leveling set screws. Do not loosen the middle screw as this one is used to hold the riving knife in place. Do note that we tilted the trunnion to 45 degrees just to give you a better view. However, it is recommended to set the blade to 0 or 90 degrees, just as you'll need to make adjustments and be able to see both sides of the blade and the riving knife. You'll start by loosening the upper and lower cap screw as seen here to allow adjustments to the 4 set screws in the corners. As seen here, the riving knife will move in and out as you adjust the set screws. Place a straight edge against the blade and the riving knife and adjust the corner set screws in and out until the riving knife and blade are parallel to each other. Make sure to check the parallelism with the blade at the top and the base of the riving knife. The 2 lower corner set screws are used to adjust the tilt of the riving knife until it is aligned with the blade. Place a straight edge against the blade and riving knife and adjust the lower corner set screws in and out until the riving knife and blade are parallel to each other. Once the blade and riving knife are parallel, tighten the upper cap screw and check for any shift in the riving knife as the cap screw is tightened. If the riving knife does shift, adjust the corresponding set screws in or out as needed. After confirming the riving knife and blade are aligned on both sides, fully tighten the upper and lower cap screws to lock the setting and then check the alignment again for good measures. Once done, we'll reinstall the table insert. Now we will be installing the dust outlet. Do note that the mounting hardware of the dust outlet is pre-installed on the cabinet. We'll first need to remove the mounting hardware from the cabinet using a hex wrench. Make sure to position the dust outlet so that the 1.5 inch connection is directed towards the right extension table. Then fasten the mounting screws as seen here. Next, we'll install the hose clamp onto the end of the flex hose and connect the hose to the dust outlet inside the cabinet. Tighten the hose clamp, ensuring that the flex hose is secured to the dust outlet. Next, we'll install the blade guard. Now we'll be installing the dust extraction system. Use the pre-mounted brackets and hardware to securely attach the overarm pipings to the rear rail. Remove the two mounting screws, then align the threaded holes in the bracket with the holes on the rail and tighten the screws to secure the overarm assembly to the rail. From there, we'll tighten the clamp screws fully and evenly on both sides. Now we will be connecting the flexible hose to the blade guard and the overarm pipe. Notice that we'll be using the shorter of the two flexible hoses here. The longer flexible hose will be connected from the overarm pipe to the cabinet dust outlet, as seen here. Now we will be unboxing and assembling the Compass MG-36PRO Miter Gauge. What should be included is the following item: the instruction manual, the micro adjust flip stop, the locking handle, hex wrenches, eccentric blocks, and the stopping pin for the flip stop. The fence and extension, and lastly, the miter gauge body. Start by removing both lock nubs and dovetail lock block on the fence bracket and set them aside. Before installing the fence onto the miter gauge body, we'll need to calibrate the miter bar in the T-slots by adjusting the eccentric blocks or cam with a hex wrench. Starting with the eccentric block on both ends of the miter bar, adjust each eccentric block so that the miter bar can slide in the T-slot smoothly without lateral play. After confirming the miter bar slides smoothly without lateral play, reinstall the fence bracket, lock knobs, and dovetail lock block. Align the fence mounting slot with the dovetail lock block and slide the fence extrusion onto the bracket. To avoid damage to your tool and equipment, the fence must not interfere with the blade. The distance from the fence to the blade can vary based on the angle of the cut, but can also vary from machine to machine. Always double check your setup before you start operating your machine. To secure and lock the gauge body into place, you will need to install the clamp handle into the gauge body and tighten it firmly. Loosen the flip stop locking knob to allow the lock block to slide into the T-slot on the fence, then install the flip stop. Simply slide the flip stop onto the fence T-slot and tighten the lock knob to secure the flip stop in place. With the blade fully raised and perpendicular to the table, use a reference square to check for perpendicularity or squareness of the miter gauge fence to the blade. To adjust the fence perpendicularity to the blade, loosen the 4 fence bracket screws, which will allow you to make minor adjustments. Once we have loosened the 4 fence bracket screws and confirmed that the miter fence is squared to the blade, retighten the screws and recheck for perpendicularity. Loosening the extension lock knob will allow you to telescope the extension out of the main fence body to the desired length, then secure it by retightening the lock knob. If the extension needs to be relocated to the other side of the fence body, loosen and remove the lock knob and slide the extension off the main fence. Slide the extension bar into the main fence body on the opposite side and bring it to the desired position before tightening the extension lock knob back into place. With that, we are now done with the installation of our table saw. We hope this video was helpful. If there are any questions, then please do not hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you for watching and see you on the next video.